This episode of Back to the Roots podcast is brought to you by Byron Seeds. The folks at Byron Seeds believe organic requires a different perspective, plan, and approach. Organic isn't simply a different type of product or even a different way of farming. It's a different way of thinking, planning, commitment. It's a different philosophy on how to feed the world. Many won't understand, but the people at Byron Seeds do. We're owned by organic dairy farmers. We not only have the product, but we plan, manage, and execute organic. We speak your language, we share your struggles, and we laud your successes. Organic isn't a way of doing business, it's a community. We learn from each other. We're in this together. We'd be glad to talk cropping plans, management systems, the road to profitability. We understand what you're trying to do. We're farmers just like you. Visit us at byronseeds.net or give us a call at 800-801-3596. And thanks to Byron Seeds. We are also brought to you by Soil Biotics. Soil Biotics Efficient is a fish emulsion-based liquid organic fertilizer concentrate providing a rich source of nutrients that slowly break down and release nitrogen into the soil. It can be used in organic programs as a part of preseason and in-season growth programs. Efficient is an excellent food source for soil microbes. From pre-plant soil preparation to post-harvest soil maintenance, Soil Biotics organic products are formulated to work together to provide a continuous, beneficial growth environment to meet all of your organic agricultural needs. For product details, visit soilbiotics.com. Finally, we are brought to you by our newest sponsor, Elite Equine and Farm Supply. Elite Equine and Farm Supply strives to provide the equine world with the most innovative and highest quality health and wellness products on the market. Elite Equine offers the Equilume masks and stable light fixtures to horse breeders and performance horse trainers across the country. If you've been looking for top quality supplements for your horses, look no further. We have you covered with hemp supplements and the Tribute Equine Nutritions. Elite Equine also offers the most innovative horse blanket, which provides heat and massage therapy for your horse on demand. Elite Equine is located in the heart of Amish country, just a quarter mile north of Mount Hope, Ohio. Be sure to visit their website at eliteequineandfarmsupply.com or visit us on Facebook. And thanks to Elite Equine. You're listening to Back to the Roots podcast, and today Mike Klein and I are sitting down with Klaas Martens, who is from Penn Yan, New York, and an organic farmer, looking at your list of crops here, quite the variety of grains, and then getting into dairy, farming about 2,000 acres, and him and his wife Mary own Lakeview Organic Grains. Thanks a lot for sitting down with us today, Klaas. Can you give a little bit more of an introduction than that on what it is you're doing and what brought you there?
Well, thanks for having me. I actually grew up thinking that my parents were backwards and went through the university system and learned how to farm the right way from the chemical perspective and farmed 20 years with chemicals. But before that, I'd been subject to subversive information. My grandmother had lived in Germany at the time of Rudolf Steiner. My parents never quite trusted the chemicals. And I remember my father telling me over and over, they told us this stuff was safe, they lied to us, and I'm probably going to die because of the chemical exposure. And he ended up dying of cancer. So he had a premonition. So I had that, but at the same time I had the arrogance of youth and I was a very good chemical farmer. But I couldn't make a living doing it very well. And we finally looked at organic when we didn't see any alternative. We were farming the government programs to make a living. It really didn't feel good to know we were probably losing money on our farm and making up the difference in subsidies. And one day there was an ad in the paper that was looking for organic wheat at double conventional price. And we figured, what do we got to lose? And I did all the calculations of how much lower yield we could get and how many things could go wrong. Of course, the alternative was we weren't doing very well anyway, so we tried it, and it was very successful. But in doing that, I wanted to know what farmers used to buy to replace the fertilizers I was using, and what farmers used to use to replace the pesticides that I was using. And I learned that that was a very naive question, and it was a very wrong question. I learned in my life afterwards that having the right answer to the wrong question is not at all helpful. The question that we seem to be taught by the system is whenever there's something we don't like, that it's a random event and we have to figure out how to kill it. You know, every problem that we see, the answer is how do you kill it? And those answers, while we were good at doing it, we're not getting at why we were having these problems. There was an assumption of randomness. It's almost like everything that goes wrong is just a random event in a world that has no plan.
Mm-hmm.
But what I found in observation was telling me the opposite, and I was confused because everything I saw told me there was order, there was a plan, there was something going on here that had an intelligence to it. And what I'd been taught and was assuming was that it was all random. You can't see what's going on when you have assumptions that get in the way. So I had to unlearn some things, and I had to get rid of my assumptions and finally believe my eyes and my senses. And then after that, I could start to learn the truth anyway. And I found that everything in this creation is done according to a very highly intelligent design, way beyond anything we can understand. But if there's an intelligent design, there had to be a designer. And I also learned that we can plug into that knowledge if we're humble and learn answers to our questions if we ask the right ones. So that's something that's been a real revelation to me. We see an order in the soil. Why don't spring weeds come up in the fall? I never asked that question before. Why don't fall weeds come up in the spring? In fact, I learned now that if we have a major weed flush, it's telling me that there's something wrong in the soil, and that weed flush is actually there stimulated because of the problem, and those weeds are actually fixing the problem. They were created to change. Every plant changes the soil, and these seeds lay there. They can lay there dormant for 100 years, and when their services are called for, they will suddenly come out of dormancy and grow and do what they were intended to do. So it's a grace on the land that is very similar to the grace we have. And of course it's similar. It's from the same place.
And we tend to look at weeds as a curse, not as a grace, or, it's showing you what's wrong.
That's right.
But the thistles are growing for a reason.
Exactly. And of course it took me a long time to come to terms, which if I claim to believe what Scripture said, God said when he made the world that it was good. And he doubled down. He said it's very good. Well, Satan never created anything, so why do we assume some of the creation is bad? Do we take the word as truth, or do we think we can edit on it? And that really took some humbling and some rethinking when I realized that I had been acting in a way that was counter to what I knew to be the truth. So every one of these plants that was created has a purpose. I also found that when we have a problem in our field, that it's usually of our own making, and that the weeds are there fixing it. And that the problem is usually because we don't have enough different crops on our farm. The world was made with all these different plants, and we were given them and told to tend it. And yet we think we need to grow corn and soybeans and maybe a little alfalfa and nothing else. Mm-hmm. And I've found that the cause of most of the agronomic problems that we deal with is from not using the whole range of crops that were made for us to use. I've also found that every serious agronomic problem that I've run into has been solved by introducing the right new species or the right new crop to the farm.
And how do you determine what that crop is? Is it because of what is growing?
Well, I've learned some tools to use, and the biggest tool is that when I see the problem, I have to humbly ask the Spirit, to draw my attention to what I should be noticing. I need to ask, why did you create this? What was its purpose? What is it doing now? What have I done that caused it to be needed? And what do you want me to learn from this? Those are very different questions than how do I kill it? And getting the right answer to the wrong question is really not helpful at all. Learning to ask the right questions and learning to go to the right source to ask those questions is a big step. And it's a big step when we've been taught to do just the opposite.
So outside of opening yourself up to that answer and the humbleness behind that, what were those resources to you to learn, and how did you apply some of what you learned along the way?
One of the interesting early resources was we went to the library at Cornell, and I had reasoned that people were growing crops before 1945. There were almost no books in the main library that were written before then, at least not on agriculture. But there were in the stacks in the old archives. And I found one particular professor. He was a German professor. He was considered the guru of weeds for the world at one point. And he wrote something that really made me stop and think. What he wrote was, cultural practices form the basis of all weed control, while the various other means should be regarded as auxiliary only. Now, this man's name was Bernard Rademacher, and he was the pioneer who first experimented with herbicides. And he was saying that the herbicides were not a solution. Interesting, coming from the guy that pioneered their use. In fact, well into the 50s, when the herbicides were changing agriculture, he kept hammering at his students to notice the downsides, to notice that this was not a long-term solution, that it was just a Band-Aid that was leading to another problem, or a Band-Aid that was letting the problem remanifest itself in a different way. And what I'm starting to see is that when I've had my farm, not when we had problems, it was a little bit like the idiot light coming on in the car. It was telling me, whoa, this is not working. And it's a lot like having sin in your life. If that idiot light comes on, if our goal is to make it go out, we could put a tape over it, we could clip the wires. It wouldn't take away the reason why that thing's on. If we've got a problem with sin in our lives, we could ignore the minister. We could find a different minister who's not going to bug us, but it's not going to deal with the reason that I've got a problem. Well, the same thing in the land. So these things that I've seen in the fields have been there trying to get my attention and trying to get me to change something. When I can take it that way, then I can start moving ahead.
Mm-hmm. So your first wheat crop, did you have this mindset at that point, or?
Oh, I was far from it.
Okay. So you just grew some organic crops and developed this mindset and this approach by, but like you said, humbling yourself?
Yeah, I was very stubborn. I was really sure that I knew what I was doing, which was a guarantee that I didn't. and I was really considered good at farming with chemicals, so it was a real turnaround. But I mentioned I'd been corrupted probably by having parents who were asking questions, and a grandmother who was really who understood Rudolf Steiner, who was really questioning the modern methods. So when I started seeing problems, I also had this playing in the background. Now, some of my stubbornness would say I ignored that before, and I'm going to keep ignoring it until it finally finds a home. But I think we're that way by human nature. Mm-hmm. And I've felt really fortunate to be able to learn answers to some of these questions, learn right answers. For instance, I've found that every one of these problems that I've run into has helped me. That when I finally solved them, it made me more successful. And it helped me have tools for moving ahead and solving more difficult ones when they came. Mm-hmm. So one of my early ones, and I talked about it with the group, was that we hadn't had animals on the farm in 50 years where we lived. Our daughter got a couple of calves, and they were instantly full of coccidiosis. Now, experts would tell you if you haven't had animals on the place in a while, you shouldn't have a problem for a while. That wasn't the case. And what I learned was that I had been imbalancing my soil by putting on excess calcium and using the wrong material. And the cattle were showing a severe deficiency of copper and iron, which was manifesting itself as parasites. At the same time, I was having crop issues due to the same imbalance. When I finally hit on the answer, and I don't think you have the time here to go into all the details, but when I finally hit on the answer, the problem went away. Has not come back since.
But I do want to hear your process of how you went through. You don't have to go into all the detail, but how did you make those connections?
Well, I was very fortunate, and I think this is how the Spirit works. I was put in contact with the right people in the right writings at the right time. And I actually realized that I had read some of these solutions before, but they didn't mean anything to me. I had to be teachable. And when I finally got it this time, when I was teachable, then I realized, I read this before, but I wasn't seeing it. It's kind of like the truth is hidden in plain sight, but it's only revealed to you when you're ready.
Mm-hmm.
Which makes for another interesting lesson going forward.
Mm-hmm.
That God is trying to get our attention quite a lot, and we just have to finally give it to Him.
Mm-hmm.
So, with this parasite thing, a vet friend, Hugh Carriman, suggested a material for us to try, and what I remember he said that was such a teachable thing was he said, you're going to have to mix it with molasses. It's so bitter, they're going to refuse to eat it if you try this. And I spilled a little, and 3 of them were over each other trying to eat it. Now that tells me they knew better than I did what they needed. Mm-hmm. And this problem went away so fast because this material had the missing mineral in it.
Mm-hmm. But then to get your soil balance was probably, or get that back because you were over applying calcium, that was not an overnight fix.
That took a while, but the realization of what was happening, then all of a sudden it was a chain reaction. I had read in Neil Kinsey's book, Hands-on Agronomy, exactly what I was doing, but it didn't mean anything to me until I was teachable.
Mm-hmm.
I had read some of this in some of the Albrecht papers, but I had to come back to it. And all of a sudden the light came on. And praying for the answer, I realized I'd been shown the answer before. What I should have been praying for was to be open to it. Mm-hmm. to understand it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of very much, I'd say very much New Testament or very much Paul, that the truth is sometimes a stumbling block. Mm-hmm. God hides it right in full sight of everybody.
I haven't heard it phrased like that. How long have you been organic?
This has been 94.
94. Okay.
I started the transition in 92.
So 27 years now. And these lessons along the way, I'm just trying to think of a way to basically ask, like, how would you recommend to other people that did you go whole hog into organic, or was it one of these where you had to kind of...
I was sticking my toe in it. I did only the worst fields, only my poorest soils. I was so afraid to make the change. And then one day when I was folding up the sprayer, my right arm wouldn't move. That morning I was fine. That night my arm wouldn't move. And I was paralyzed on the right side. And I was faced with a decision because we were partway through transition, but I was still using chemicals. And I had to decide, could I hire someone to do this job that I can't do anymore because it made me sick? And can I honestly hire somebody to do something that I think could kill me or might kill them? And my wife and I made the decision then that we had to go cold turkey and make the change and have faith that we were going to figure it out.
Did you figure out what was wrong? with your arm?
I went to a chiropractor. I also was directed, there was an Acres talk where I happened to end up sitting in on Murray Bass' talk, which was no of interest to me. I wasn't even going to be there. And all of a sudden he described what was going on. And I went to him, and he was a naturopath. He gave me some things, and by the end of the summer, I had my use of my arm back.
So again, got to be open to.
Yeah. There are no coincidences. And I can't claim credit.
Mm-hmm. I think that what you just said with there are no coincidences. When I think of that, and Kevin Keno mentions that a lot, where everybody you meet for a reason.
Yes.
But when you actually think about there not being such a thing as a coincidence, it can almost be overwhelming, because that puts a lot of weight on every interaction and everything that happens.
That's right.
And, you kind of, I just ran into him.
Yeah.
Well, why did I?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Was I supposed to do something here? Mm-hmm. So another thing that happened when we converted to organic, I got a lot of help from a group of farmers who taught me an economic rule, an economic law that changed my outlook. When we were conventional, if you learned something that could help you, give you an advantage, you wouldn't share it with anybody. It was a secret. There were these 6 farmers had markets for part of their organic crops. I came along with a big farm, potential competitor, and they shared everything they knew about it, told me where their markets were. They did something that was so stupid, it was unthinkable. That fall, we didn't have enough to fill the demand. So they gave away something they didn't have enough of, and we all ended up having more. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of humbling to have people being willing to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, it's a community.
That's right.
It truly is the organic community.
That's right.
And these lessons that you learn, you're willing to share with others. And it's just a revolving cycle. It's a beautiful cycle.
So the wisdom of this world is foolishness to God. And we saw that the wisdom of this world was foolishness. They showed me that. They went ahead and did something that other people laughed at and benefited. I benefited with them.
I think that's one of the most beautiful things within the organic community is that sharing of knowledge, where if you find out that something works great, farmers can't wait to share it with other farmers.
Right.
And also, if something does not work, share it with others so they don't make the same mistake. I think it's so powerful to hear a story like that. It's not like it's easy to bring a neighbor in or help somebody if the market demands are there because they need more product.
Right.
But they didn't have the market.
That's right.
And they still helped you along.
That's right.
That speaks volumes of them as people.
Yes. But it also points out that when the truth is revealed to us by the Spirit, we have a responsibility to share it. It would really be the height of arrogance to be given something that freely and to try to hoard it.
Mm-hmm. Doesn't it say something about, and I don't mean to bash any conventional farmer, I respect them, but if you have a advantage in the conventional world, the instinct is to not share.
That's right.
And in the organic world, it's the exact opposite. Shouldn't that be a red flag?
It should be. And to me, but for the grace of God, I would have gone. That was my direction. So I have to be very thankful that the Spirit was patient and persistent to get my attention.
So how many acres did you start out with? You said that first crop was wheat.
Yeah, we did about 70 or 80 out of 600 last year.
And then how long did it take you to get all the land transitioned into organics?
Legally, it takes 3 years. I had my paralysis come 2 years in, so within 5 years we were fully organic.
Okay.
That was scary. I mean, we went to the extension and they told us, well, this might work in a garden, a couple of hippies with some tomatoes, but it'll never work on full-scale fields. Mm-hmm. And that was what the attitude was. But, the other thing that happened is Cornell has provided the researchers and the resources and really supported what we were doing and helped us fill in some of these gaps. And a lot of this knowledge that, honestly, I have to credit the Spirit with, but Cornell was doing the science on the other side of it. And it's really fun to be able to share the science at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to understand the science.
Because Cornell has done some tremendous work in organic research.
Yes. And they have really, really moved us ahead. Now, at the same time, Cornell has some of the most regressive professors, too.
Sure.
And I got to really respect Dean Henry at the time. She was from the biotech world. The organic community did not support her. But when she was appointed dean, she said that I am the dean of agriculture, not of conventional agriculture or organic agriculture, but of agriculture. And she defended academic freedom. Basically, the idea that the truth is important and the truth is valuable enough to allow all these positions to contend. I think if we don't listen to the other side, we're actually afraid that we're wrong. There has to be a confidence there that allows us to listen.
Because in today's society, you just want to surround yourself with equal people that think like you do and live in an echo chamber so you're not challenged.
That's right.
You can't grow without a challenge. Same with when my kids were in sports, I'd tell them being on a winning team doesn't build character.
No.
It's when you lose is when the character is built.
You need to play someone who's better than you are
Yes.
if you want to get better yourself.
Which brings some losses along the way.
That's right. There is the risk of loss. But out of this the group of farmers, Cornell, and then finding these old sources and finding the right people, if we believe there are no coincidences, these things were aligned.
Oh, that could look overwhelming when you look backwards. You know how everything has a plan.
Yes, that's right. No matter how hard we try to avoid it.
How do you navigate through, knowing that there's a reason for an interaction or something you read or whatever it may be, and looking for that bit of knowledge you can use, but not being overwhelmed by it?
I fail regularly. But there's also grace, fortunately.
So
I have a confidence because I can look back and see how faithful God has been in this journey. I can fail and pick myself up and start over and not be dismayed. At least sounds good, but that's I try hard.
Yeah. But I mean, obviously, and I guess I shouldn't assume that farm size is success. But you said you transitioned originally 600 acres, and now you're farming 2,000. Yep. Originally, you had this group of farmers that didn't have enough, and all of a sudden there was more than enough. What's driven the growth of the farm, and how do you manage that size of a farm?
Well, my son is managing it now.
Okay.
So that has really helped. My wife has run the feed business, and she's been really good at doing what she does. And that feed business was built originally because we realized that we had to have diversity. We had to have more crops. And realizing that, we had to help develop those markets. So the feed business became a market for farmers to grow a wider range of things. I think, we had a lot of luck, if you believe in luck. But these pieces kind of fit together. The other thing is, it sounds like a lot of size. There's a young man working with my son whose father made some bad decisions, and he's buying the family farm. He's part of the group. So we're calling it one operation, but there are more people involved. Mm-hmm. And he's actually going to be able to make the payments this year, which is huge for something that most people would have said it's impossible to go buy land at the prices it is now and work, but he did it. The dairy farm that we have, that this young man who used to be a manager of a Walgreens came in, he's going to be buying it. He's eager to buy it. Within a year, I think he's going to be able to cash flow this. So, and there are some other young people involved. So my biggest joy is in being able to launch a young farmer out of this land base. And hopefully they'll be reducing the land base eventually.
Yep. I think you said something really interesting about the feed business was needed because you need a bigger diversity of crops.
Yes.
So you were not doing that corn, soybean,
right,
whatever you want to call it. But so what kind of crops did that allow you to expand into?
Well, our feeds include a lot of small grains. That business also branched into seed fairly soon to supply seeds to people for, those crops. And we're using peas. And now my wife has found a tremendous demand for no soy feeds. There's a whole audience out there that doesn't want soy in their food chain. So she's been able to supply those farmers with what they wanted. But at the same time, it's opened up markets for people to grow the peas on their farms. And again, this is something I can't claim credit for luck. These things fell together in a way that just grew way beyond what we had planned or done.
And you would think that the diversity of the crops that you were then allowed to grow also helped balance the soil on the farms that it was raised on.
That's exactly right. So a healthy community and a healthy soil was complementing. And a chef friend, Dan Barber, I don't know if that's anyone you've heard of.
It's not.
He operates Blue Hill restaurant on the Rockefeller estate. And he wrote a book that talks about our farm. But he also has made a discovery, and he said that a healthy diet should support a healthy agriculture. And he's adding diversity to the meals that he makes. And one of the meals that he invented is called rotation risotto, where he has a dish with a crop rotation represented on it, saying that this is how our diet has to look if we're going to support a healthy agriculture, and if we're going to be healthy.
Boy, that's interesting, because you always think of, healthy soil, healthy makes healthy food, healthy people. You never add that, maybe we should eat that it benefits the farm. It's a different way of thinking. That's right. It's really neat.
And Dan Barber is his name. He is really discerning in taste. And he said whenever he could taste the diversity, that whenever he found something that he thought tasted better than he'd ever seen it before, and he always asked questions about why, it always took him back to this came from a more diverse system. That the farming system ended up giving more flavor.
That's so encouraging that other people see that, because, we work in the organic community, and we know, or we certainly feel that the farmers that we work with are doing something that benefits everybody, not only in a healthy way, but also with delicious food.
Right.
And to know that a chef can taste that difference is incredible to me.
He does something in his bakery. He produces an einkorn bread with exact same recipe, einkorn from a really diverse system, einkorn from another place. And you can see the difference in how the bread looks, and he's controlled for everything else. Dan impressed me when I first met him, because he said, if I have a choice between a conventionally grown head of cabbage that I think tastes great and an organic whatever that I don't think is up to par, I'm going to serve conventional. So he's not coming at it saying organic is better. He's asking why is it better and finding it's because it's organic. It's a much more honest way of presenting it.
And I think we've seen that conversation expand further too with, I think that's kind of captured in the regenerative, which is certainly a buzzword right now, but that's what's attempting to be captured there is, I know I have met organic by neglect farmers.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that what they're producing is not.
That's sad but true.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and it doesn't have to be.
And organic is not a catch-all.
That's right. Yes. But organic is a marketing tool.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So we can farm really well and not be certified organic, but we can't sell it as certified organic unless we go through that process.
Mm-hmm. But certainly organic is a system that is set up to allow a farmer to follow that principle of
Yes.
healthy soil, healthy food, healthy people.
And I think it's a miracle that the rules are actually as good as they are.
Mm-hmm.
That the rules actually produce what they were supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen so many examples of where following the rules made you a better farmer.
Mm-hmm.
Quite often we're talking about our freedoms instead of understanding why are the rules what they are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that, early on when I started working in the organic, arena, you heard people talk about what they can't use if they transition to organics.
Yeah.
Like they felt like they were just throwing the toolbox in the trash.
Yes.
Well, it's just a different set of tools.
That's right.
So instead of focusing on what you can't use in organic production, why not focus on all the positives that you can?
Actually, you could have my wife on for this section better than me, because the way she puts it is that we try to define organic as the thou shalt nots,
Mm-hmm.
where we should be defining it as the thou shalts.
Mm-hmm. Boy,
That's very well put.
very well put.
Which I think she really gets that, and she's very good at communicating it too. And I think we're very fortunate that she's the one facing the public. She spends a lot of time advising backyard chicken growers on how to get their flocks healthy. Spends a lot of time with farmers deciding what seeds to plant, what cover crops to use.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't charge for that, but it's kind of the mission work.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Did you always have an interest in agronomy on that side?
Yes, I always had an interest. She was actually from the city.
Okay.
But she always had an interest in agronomy. She had a degree in plant breeding. Mm-hmm. And I was always a farmer from the beginning. But I always had these questions, and I realize now looking back that the assumptions I was farming under were not matching my observations. And it bothered me. Even the years when I was conventional, it was more in denial. But it bothered me that my observations were contradicting my assumptions. And it's amazing looking back that I was so stubborn about hanging on to those assumptions
Mm-hmm.
when the observations kept challenging them.
What were those assumptions?
They had to do with that we're farming reactively, that our problems are random.
Okay. Yep.
That the farming is a series of responding to challenges. And also that there is no other way to make it work, no other way to feed the world. That was a bad assumption. But it's really, I think there's a denial there because, especially when we had little kids born, I come in stinking like pesticides. It really didn't feel good to have my wife point out that the washing machine that my stinking pesticide clothes went into was also doing the baby's clothes. There's a guilt there, which is easy to hide in denial.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I have a very hard time criticizing my conventional neighbors, because I was there. And I'm thankful to have been shown a different path.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guilty of the same things.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard to confess something like that. It's not comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was quite a while in most farmers' lives where they thought that was the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
That was the way to farm. So then even if you transition to organics and totally believe the system, it's still kind of hard to admit that, boy, I was way off and
That's
I was
right.
wrong there, because I think that's the hardest thing for the human brain to comprehend, is actually being wrong.
Yeah, and for me to say I endangered my children,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a big load to take. So I think there's a really heavy dose of denial.
Mm-hmm.
I know I was carrying it. Another piece of denial that, and my wife pointed that one out to me, and it was uncomfortable. It was on Sunday afternoons we would go look at crops. Look at, oh, he's not doing very well, and this guy probably won't make it through the year. And of course, everybody is everyone else's takeover candidate, and we knew they were out looking at our fields. In fact, I heard back that they were taking bets on how long it'd be before our auction when we switched to organic, because that was a guarantee that we were done. But she pointed that out to me, and suddenly I realized, can I be a neighbor to someone who's my takeover candidate? It's not comfortable to be told when you're doing something that's that obviously not good.
Mm-hmm. But there's a power in confessing that.
That's right.
Denial.
Yes.
That those are some of the most powerful learning stories for when I'll just use farming as the example here, that if you're willing to say, I did it like this.
That's right.
For this long, and I did it well, but I saw where I was wrong, and now here's why I do it differently.
That's
that
right.
message comes across more powerful than anything that a person that just decided they wanted to be organic.
Yeah. Yeah, and we really have to own these things at some point.
Eventually you will have to.
That's right. It's better if we do it first according to the way we're supposed to.
Yeah.
Because we'll do it sooner or later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was all part of the learning process.
Mm-hmm.
And the huge things that we've been able to do with Cornell and the things that I shared with the farmers here were gifts from having done that.
Mm-hmm. So if you look at your farming operation and your farming history, what is the most eye-opening and mind-blowing thing that you discovered that this weed is because of X, and if I plant this, the problem goes away?
Well, the weed that was the biggest teacher to me, I talked about, was velvet leaf. And I actually wondered if certain fields couldn't be farmed organically at one point because it was such a tough weed. And it grew so big, and there was just so much of it. And when we'd been farming organically for about 6 or 7 years, I thought I suddenly had gotten to be a smarter cultivator operator because it wasn't as bad. The patches were smaller. What I didn't notice was that it was also growing shorter. Slowly, I became aware that there were diseases in the velvet leaf. There was a fungus, there was a virus, and it was being attacked by whiteflies. And at first, I still was stupid. I still had it totally wrong. I said, I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm going to catch these spores and sell them as a product to get rid of velvet leaf, until my friend Tony at Cornell, who's a professor, popped my balloon, and he said, well, great idea, but how come that field over there has it and it's not being affected? By these, it's not killing it. Mm-hmm. So we kept going ahead, and to fast forward, what I've realized is that velvet leaf had a fungus and a virus and was covered with insects because it was sick. Not that it was sick because of the diseases in the insects. I had it totally backwards. To me, that was mind-blowing.
Mm-hmm. And what was causing the velvet leaf to have that disease?
It was not fit for the environment in the field. Mm-hmm. I still don't know the details. I know pieces of what we did. But somehow the environment changed, and the velvet leaf was no longer fit to grow there. Mm-hmm. The environment we were making when we were farming with chemicals, the velvet leaf was better fit than our crop. And then we were using poisons to try to select out one and grow the other.
So it wasn't one application of a soil amendment or anything like that really made the difference. It was just the farming practices and the way you were treating the soil.
Yes.
Just you build it to the point where the velvet leaf was like, I don't like living here.
Yes, and it took me back to this professor, Rademacher, who said cultural practices form the basis of all weed control. And in his writings, he described this. If you can create an environment, provide an environment, you're not really creating, but we provide an environment where our crop is the best adapted species. That crop's going to be bulletproof.
When you said that cultural practices form the basis of all weed control earlier, it took me it wasn't quite my brain was not wrapping my head around what you meant by that.
Yes. Cultural practices is not a common term.
Right? But saying that example,
yeah,
that put it into perspective.
And he's had another quote that really instructed me, and that is that every crop should be planted after its most suitable predecessor, so that the vigor of the crop alone checks the growth of the weeds.
So you worked on crop rotations with that mindset?
I developed it. I was dragged into it kicking and screaming. But also, this is where the Spirit was leading. This was a gift. Mm-hmm. This is not my ingenuity. This was a gift that was revealed to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think of something as simple as, a farmer planting corn into a pasture field. Yep. You always hear, that's the best crop of corn that I've ever had.
Yep.
But they don't keep doing it.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So just opening your eyes to that, but I guess the question for you is, do you have a set rotation?
No. I feel like my son would like to have a set one because it would make things easier. What I'm finding is weather changes, I make mistakes, and the land talks to us. So it's still requiring us to make changes. And we have certain soils, especially the ones we were able to rent because nobody wanted them. I can't farm them the way I do the best soil. So everything is kind of in harmony. It has to be a team project with the soil. Not my will imposed on it.
Do you think that taking those farmed out soils or rougher soils and, whatever you want to call it, babying them along or doing the right practices can get them up to the level of the good soil that you have?
We've found that they are up to it.
Okay.
In fact, some of the farms that people cynically said, well, that's good enough for you, but I wouldn't bother with that ground. Now they're trying to run them out from under me.
Now, are you building your soils with inputs or rotations or a combination of both?
A combination, but the most expensive inputs I'm using are soil conservation practices. We're putting in diversion ditches, we're putting in water and sediment control basins, we're strip cropping. We're spending a fair amount of money on. I'm kind of a tightwad on inputs. Mm-hmm. It's more the rotation, the crop diversity, and then judicious use of inputs. And I said in the talk, I'm a bit of a tightwad, but I think we need to do the things that are free first. We need to do the things that are cheap second. And if we have a lot of money left that we want to risk, then we can invest in the things that are expensive to do. Mm-hmm. As far as inputs. Mm-hmm. Isn't great for the trade show.
But now you have added animals.
Yes.
To the system, and
they've made it stronger.
Okay.
And made it more resilient. They've allowed us to add species of crops that we can market.
And is that the reason why the animals are there?
That and the idea that I also wanted to show that we're feeding more people on the same amount of land. And I think we can feed more people if our farm includes animals on the same resource base. Mm-hmm. And we are still trying to feed 9 billion people coming up on 2050. And having an elite food system that's condemning 1 billion people to starve to death wouldn't be moral either. So we need to be productive. Mm-hmm. Another quote that I gave out in the talk was that I've learned that God is not at all efficient. Efficiency isn't a human concept. Give less, take more. God is just simply abundant. And we can see examples. Is 1 million apple blossoms efficient? Is 1 million grains of pollen efficient? But it's beautiful, mm-hmm. and it's productive. Mm-hmm. The Because having half the energy that a plant makes going out of the root exudate's efficient. But it's abundant and it's productive.
Yeah, and the word efficiency is the small farmer's worst friend.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. Because as soon as efficiencies come along, it's scale,
yep,
truckloads, and when we look at the small farmers in the region, boy, efficiency is a scary topic.
It's a term that has to do with scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
Our God is about abundance. The two aren't really compatible.
Mm-hmm.
And we can see it in his creation. In fact, I learned that from an architect, the dean of the School of Architecture in Virginia. He didn't say the word God, but he said nature is not efficient.
Mm-hmm.
But we know who made nature. And the observation, I think, was really good. You know, that abundance is all around us. It's in our mind that we suddenly become scarce. And that goes back to this idea of when we were driving around on Sundays looking at the neighbor's farm. There was the assumption that there's not enough to go around, so I've got to have yours.
Mm-hmm.
And also the feeling of there's not enough comes from management practices as well.
That's right. And it's a fear-based. And farming, are we about life or are we about killing? You know, fear, scarcity, all those, they're negative things.
Mm-hmm.
They don't make for healthy communities.
Mm-hmm. We see that all around right now.
That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very small step from fear to violence.
And you see that switch happening really quick, and you're seeing a lot more of it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. We got a big job ahead of us in this world, but beyond farming. But we need to at least get the farming as best we can.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Klaas, it seems like you're doing your part, and we really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and share your views and stuff you've learned along the way. And we'd love to have you back on and actually get out to your farm sometime and see what you've been able to do over the years.
We'd love to have you.
So,
and the cleaning barn is something I think you'd find fascinating, because this is creating a way to produce food in a human available form. Our last machine is a barley pearler. So that now instead of just selling barley for malt or for cattle feed, we can actually produce pearl barley.
And what is pearl barley?
That's what you make your barley soup out of.
What's barley soup?
Oh, okay. So barley is eaten in a lot of Europe as a grain, but you can't eat it until you remove the outer hull.
Okay.
So we got a machine that will take out the outer hull, and pearl barley is actually polished like white rice. But we can take the hull off, and we can leave as much as we want with this machine. And that's a way that the barley can be eaten directly.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Make cream of wheat the same way, by polishing wheat. So this is something we've just recently purchased. It came in today.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Came in from China. That's, we're having to buy machines in China because we don't make them here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would definitely love to see your operation. Brian and I work with a lot of farmers, but very small scale, very different operations than what you've got going on. And with the feed mill and everything, it sounds really fascinating. What you're doing, like Brian said, in putting your knowledge out there, helping other farmers, it's great to see.
Well, I don't feel that I have a choice. How can I repay the generosity of this gift of knowledge?
Mm-hmm.
And how can I steward it correctly if I don't share it?
That's why you said you would sit down with us. Huh?
Yeah.
You felt guilty.
Not guilty.
Okay.
Blessed.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also responsible.
Mm-hmm.
because if with the kind of knowledge that has been entrusted to me, it has to be used responsibly. If I tried to use it selfishly, it would spoil it. Actually, it would destroy me. Dave Maddox gave me quite a lesson when I expressed to him if you remember Dave at Fertrell, my frustration. I said, I really wish I could understand the whole creation here, how this all works. Dave said, you be thankful that you can't. Satan couldn't handle the power that went with that knowledge. You think you could? No, I can't. So this is all part of, and that's why I really have to give credit, because as soon as I start thinking I figured this out, I'm in trouble.
Yep.
So hopefully I'm not failing too badly. It's a bit of a charge to try to keep humble and keep giving credit where it belongs.
Sure. Thank you so much for taking the time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Well, it sounds like you have a way of sharing and spreading this kind of information.
We hope.
We hope.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully we can change this world. We can at least change a piece of it.
It's going to be a tiny, tiny little bit at a time.
Yeah.
But you don't eat an elephant in one bite.
No, you don't.
So.
I guess I'm always awestruck, though, at how much knowledge has been entrusted to me. Things that I thought I would never figure out, that just fell together. And the other thing that was really rewarding, last time I was at Cornell, there was some young postdocs there and some students, and I shared some of my faith with them as a group. They said, I'm glad you said that. I feel the same way.
Really?
Yeah. But it wasn't a safe environment. Somebody had, of course,